Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're well. So in this video I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my anamorphic lens setup which I'm using right now for personal work. Now if you're not sure about what anamorphic shooting is, I suggest you just type it in YouTube. You'll find loads of videos on it. Essentially it has a look. It creates a certain aesthetic to your video, and it does this by using a different type of lens which actually stretches the image vertically. You actually can capture more of the image vertically, not just horizontally. And then afterwards you will bring that image back down into the correct format, and that will give you basically a wider field of view. But it's a lot more than that. There's a certain aesthetic about the old anamorphic lenses, such as the bokeh or the out of focused areas are more oval. The way light tends to flare and react within the lens is different as well. And there's also a softness to the edges. Now if you're just shooting with anamorphic here and there outside, it's not going to necessarily look cinematic. It will look more filmic, it will look a little bit more vintagey, it will look a little bit more nostalgic, you could say. Cinematic is really going to come into place when you start working with color grading, lighting, set design, the use of depth within a scene, audio. All of those things really come together to create something cinematic. But anamorphic lenses do give you a certain aesthetic, which I personally really quite like the look of. Now with the anamorphic setup that I'm using it on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Fat Camera 4K. Now what's really cool about the Pocket 4K and the new firmware update is it actually has a dedicated anamorphic shooting mode. Now that's really useful because it actually takes your image which is stretched vertically, it brings it back down to the correct ratio so you get that straight out of camera. But an added benefit to that is you can actually shoot up to 80 frames per second. So you can actually get slow-mo with the 2.6K in the anamorphic mode, which is really quite nice. So let's go through my setup. Here we've got the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. I'll get this guy in shot just so you can see what's going on. We've got the Metabones Speedbooster XL. This is a 0.64. So this is actually taking the field of view of the sensor and it's making it wider essentially. Here we have a 55mm Super Takumar. This is the f2 version, and this is my taking lens. So this lens first goes onto the Speedbooster XL. Now I can't go any wider than 55mm because when I add the anamorphic lens to this, it's too wide, and then you start getting a fisheye effect. So there's a minimum focal length lens that you have to use when you're using the XL on the Pocket 4K, right? So this is a 6.4x, this is a 55mm. I can get away with 50 and that's about it. Anything less than that, I'm gonna start getting vignetting and problems. So I've got the 55mm. Now with this 55mm, it is actually a 49mm thread. Now I need to attach this anamorphic lens, which is the Sankor 16F. It's a lovely anamorphic lens because it's really small, it's sharp, and it gives you that wonderful aesthetic I was talking to you about. You need to attach this to this lens, but the actual diameters on the back and on the front are totally off. So you need a clamp, right? You need a clamp that will allow you to combine the two together. So I've got this clamp here, but the actual thread size on the back is 52mm. So I've got a step up ring. This is a 49mm to 52mm. Is that right? Yep, 49 to 52mm thread step up ring at the bottom just there. And then that will screw on to the front of my taking lens, which is a Takumar, and that will fit there nicely. Now I've got these little screws on the end of this clamp, which now means I can actually put my anamorphic lens in and then screw this guy down. Now once you've got this lens set up, the next thing you have to do is you have to make sure that the alignment of the lens is correct. Because right now it will be all skewed because I've just put it on without actually thinking about the alignment. And that's where you will undo the screws and you will rotate this lens until your verticals are vertical, and that's what you're looking for. So I normally point towards a door frame or something, or a table, somewhere where I know the verticals are true, and then I will adjust and rotate the lens until that sits perfectly correct. And then the next thing you'll have to do is you will have to manually focus both the taking lens and the anamorphic lens every time you want to do a shot, right? So what I've done is I've actually made this easier for myself. And the way I've done this is on the actual anamorphic lens, I've actually put some sticky labels. And these labels have certain distance markers on them. So what I do first is I always focus with the taking lens. So let's say something is, I don't know, 2 meters away. So the first thing that I'll do is I'll set my taking lens to approximately 2 meters. And then what I will do is I will focus my anamorphic lens to around about 2 meters. And I've already planned out on my anamorphic lens the points of focus, or when things come into focus at that focal length or that distance from the lens. So this takes a little bit of time. You have to set this up beforehand. Do your kind of your focusing, check where it is on your taking lens and check where it is on your anamorphic lens, and then you can put a little marker. So I've got 2.2 here, and now that I know will be roughly in focus. And if it's not, all I need to do is just adjust the anamorphic lens, and then that will give me the correct focus. Now it takes a little bit of time to get used to doing that. It's not something that just happens automatically, so you need a little bit of practice. Now there are one focus solution products out there, but they're generally quite expensive, and unless you're really using your anamorphic lens on professional work and it's just personal work, I can't really justify paying £300-400 for a focusing solution, a one focus solution like the Hardcore DNA, which although it's really good and Rectilux is a fantastic piece of kit, I've not yet justified the need to buy it. So you just plan out your markers on the lenses and then you're pretty much good to go. Yes, it does mean that there is a little bit more time taken in the focusing, but once you've got, for example, your 1.5 meters distance set, all you have to do is keep your camera within that same distance from the subject, right? So if you're working with a model, you just keep yourself at that same distance, they will remain in focus. If you need to refocus, and obviously you're gonna have to adjust the lens and the anamorphic lens, but if you've got your markers, it doesn't take that long. And what I also like about this process, when they do go a little bit in and out of focus, it actually, again, it adds to the aesthetic, because it's not always perfect, locked on, dead on focus. Again, it really depends on what you're doing. Now, the only thing I need to add now to this is another clamp of sorts, which will allow me to put ND filters or variable ND filters on this lens. And that will obviously reduce the amount of light coming in if I want to create a more shallow depth of field, shoot more wide open outside, for example. And like I said, I've used anamorphic lenses before in the past for personal work, but I've not done anything really that serious with it. But I will be creating a kind of like a fashion portrait music style video in the next few months, hopefully, if all things pan out with this COVID nonsense. And I will hopefully be using this anamorphic setup for that. Right, so that's it. I know I might have rushed through that pretty quick, and hopefully that's giving you enough information. If there's anything that I've kind of run through and it was a little bit kind of confusing, just leave me a comment below and I'll try and answer that. Once again, thank you to everybody for watching. I'll see you in the next video.